Welcome to the Dive Table. I'm Jay Gardner.
And I'm Sarah Miller, and today we're going to be talking about diving from your vehicles. So, funny story, Mr.
Funny
J.
story. Funny story or tragic story? I feel like I'm being set up here.
It's it's funny now because everything went actually really well considering the situation. But for those of you who don't know, one of the reasons we're talking about this topic is because both of us, Jay and I, do a lot of shore diving. So we dive from our vehicle, and we have two very different setups. Obviously, if you don't know, I live in my vehicle. So my van is my house, and it is a scuba van. Like, it has everything. If you're watching the video, this container right here behind me has 2 tanks, all of my side mount gear, wetsuit, dry suit. I have a back plate and wing on the other side of the van. Like, this van basically is full of scuba gear. So and we'll talk about setup and how I have things working, because it's a little chaotic to live in a scuba vehicle, especially a 40 Econoline. It's not a lot of space to work with. But this is my home and my work vehicle, basically. And I was staying with you, Jay. I was parked in your backyard, and it was wonderful. And we got to do some really great dives together. And then I hit the road, and I got to about Los Angeles. I was supposed to go to Catalina, but the weather was really bad, and so the dives got canceled and everything. So I was driving through, and it was about 10:30 at night, and my van just died on the freeway.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, on the freeway.
On the freeway. So it was a little bit scary. Luckily, I was able to pull over and got to a shoulder before because there were like some bigger spaces, and then it got completely skinny towards because it was going off into a off ramp. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get up the hill from the off ramp, so I was like, okay, I got to get over into those little spaces, because this is like, I'm done. Right. And so I'm on the side of the freeway at night. People are zipping by me, because even if you have your flashers on, the indicators or whatever, people don't slow down for that.
No.
So I'm sitting there like, oh, okay, what's the situation? And I called AAA. They were going to take an hour. And honestly, there wasn't that much space on the side to like get my van. I was just envisioning the whole process of trying to get my van onto some, to get it towed. And I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. This is so unsafe. Yeah. And so luckily I popped the hood. I looked at like the situation, what was going on, and I had a leak in my radiator, so I was out of coolant. And I found out that night that my gauges, for temperature, my temperature gauges, I don't think they work. Like, I think they're just, she's an old girl, she's 96, she just thinks I have the bare minimum here, okay? So I didn't know that it was overheating. And luckily I have some coolant. So I threw some coolant in there with some water and like managed to get her started. And I got off the freeway, found a gas station, and slept there that night.
Wow.
So this is what van life is sometimes. But I just thought I'd share that. I didn't tell you that before we started recording because, sometimes that kind of stuff happens on dive days, and it's good to have everything that you need, to have your vehicle function just as a vehicle versus like all the other stuff we need for diving. If I didn't have that coolant, I mean, I guess I could have just thrown regular water in there, right? But I was just like, thank goodness, because I was a little nervous being on the side of the freeway. Like,
yeah, no kidding.
It did not feel good.
That's a scary spot to be in. And
yeah.
And so did you end up getting it fixed, or did you find out what was wrong?
So it's funny because it's a brand new radiator, and I've had nothing but problems since getting it in before Baja. I did have, shout out to AAA, love AAA. I did have a tow, like a long distance tow in my package for the year. So I did just get it towed to my dad's house. So I'm just like hanging out outside of my dad's house, which is nice. And my brother's helping me figure out what's going on with the radiator. It's also some like mass airflow. I don't remember what that's called. It's like some kind of reader, to like check how much air is getting into the system. So something's tripping the check engine light for that too. But yeah, it's been a whole thing. Luckily, like it's been the best case, right? Like I was able to get off the freeway. I was able to sleep somewhere. It was a little sketchy, but nothing happened. So it was fine. And I was able to get a tow. So all good things. Highly recommend having AAA for your, regular vehicle, your scuba vehicle, whatever it is. Like that has been so helpful. So yeah, that was my little adventure. Highly recommend being set up, having the things that you need in case of breakdowns, jumper cables. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had to help people with that kind of stuff because they don't have cables in their car. So that's the little segue into our talk
diving
here.
out of your vehicle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because this kind of stuff happens all the time, and especially if you're in a remote shore diving spot, like having everything you need so that your car will function, like it's clutch.
It is. Yeah. No, and kudos to you for having the coolant, like you say, having the things you need to be prepared is so critical. It's so critical for anything, right? Even if it's a newer vehicle. I had to add tow chains actually to mine.
Oh, yeah.
To my setup because I have a big diesel truck, and you'd be surprised how many times I've gotten in a situation where someone needed to be pulled out of something. Yeah, it wasn't me. It was someone else.
You are the good friend to have for sure.
Yeah. So there's things that you learn over time to just have in the truck or to have in the vehicle, and coolant being one of them. A Fix-A-Flat. I always carry the little can of Fix-It-Flats in there.
Oh, smart. I just have a spare, but that's really smart.
Spare's good too, but takes more time if you're in a hairy situation like you're in.
Yeah.
You pop that Fix-A-Flat on, it'll hold it to get to the next stop, and then you can get somewhere safe to do the tire changeover.
Cool.
Is my strategy.
I'll have to look into that. Okay. What else do you, before we get into scuba gear, what else do you carry? Because like I said, I have cables, jumper cables.
Yeah,
that
cables,
has
check.
Been very, very helpful. Something I want to get for the van, because I do live in it, and I realize how probably reckless it is that I don't have this, is a fire extinguisher.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good one to have. Yep, I have a little one in my truck as well.
I need to get one. I think that's something I'm going to buy this week.
It's interesting. I bring that with me, or I started putting it in the truck because I started carrying O2 in my truck for diving.
Okay.
So that was the connection in my mind. It wasn't, but of course, it's great for everything. So everything having it there is good.
Yeah, I've run into people who have had like major electrical fires, and you have to have a special extinguisher for that, which I don't know that off the top of my head, but just in case anybody's looking for it, there's a special extinguisher for electrical fires.
Yes, actually there's a great story about that I'll tell later about the different extinguishers, but it's a really good story. So remind me of that one. Okay. But yeah, so I bring so we talked about jumper cables, Fix-A-Flat, fire extinguisher, tow cables, or towing. What do they call it? Well, it's not a cable, but it's basically a band. I forget what you call
straps
it. But it has
something.
The straps that has the hooks on one end. I also have a little tackle box, or I think they call it an ammo box, that I got from, I don't know, some outdoorsy place that was $10. And I put a bunch of bungees and some tie down straps. And I found I even created through like a metal wire, basically the metal cable that you can, on two ends of it, create loops. And then I use that on overnight stuff to run it through all the tanks and lock the tanks together in case I'm worried about, the tanks getting stolen or something like that. So I keep that in there. I keep a gallon of water. I probably need to replace that more often, but I keep water in the
I
truck
was going to
just in
say,
case.
I always have water because I live in this, but that is a big one. Like, I've run into a lot of people who have just needed water to put in, like, my situation.
Yeah, mine always gets used for the girls. They're always like, "I'm so thirsty," and then I end up busting this water. But like, I got nasty water, but that's all I got.
Yeah.
And to stop the complaining, you're just like, "Here you go," and now I need to replace the water in the truck. So yeah, that's a whole thing.
I
And then,
have, you were talking about tow stuff. For those of us that are trying to be self-sufficient, I have you don't need to get the brand. I actually don't recommend getting the brand name ones, but the Max Tracks, the grippy boards that you use to get,
mhm.
to dig out when you're stuck in sand. Again, don't get the brand name ones because they're expensive and it says lifetime warranty. There's a lot of
No.
caveats to that. I learned that from
If it's
experience.
Tuesday
Yeah,
and it's sunny
yeah,
outside,
yeah.
yeah.
Not worth it. Get the cheaper ones. But those have been a lifesaver when traveling around Baja and diving from weird places there.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of what I mentioned, all that stuff's kind of just standard.
Yeah.
But if you're going, because I'm not, in the same situation as you, I'm able to kind of come back to the house and load up things I think I might need. But wheel chocks is another one. I have a couple sets of wheel chocks, a heavy and a light. And the other thing that I like to bring with me, and it sounds silly, but it's called oh God, what is it called? Gooby I have to remember the name of it. It's a little bottle of this amazing smelling orange citrus hand wash, and it's got the grains in it. Like I think it's not sand; it's something else that's in it. And I'll tell you, when you go out and you're working on the truck or something goes wrong or whatever, your hands get full of grease, and you don't want that to come into the truck. And so I have just a little squeeze bottle right next to me at all times in the truck. I can just squeeze on my hands, get all that grease off, and then pour a little water over it, and I'm fine to get back in the truck and keep driving. So it's a little itty bitty tricky thingy that I've stuck in the truck for a long time, and it works really well. I've used it more times than not.
Yeah, that's really smart. I have a sink, so I don't think about those things. But that's a really good tip. I like that. I like that.
It's called Fast Orange. Fast Orange. I just had to look it up. Fast
Okay.
Orange is the one that I really like.
The other thing that I think is clutch for now kind of leaning more into the dive items, I like having a cooler, or like I actually have a fridge, and just being able, I know I'm so bougie.
So nice.
But it's key because then you have like, fresh food, you have snacks or whatever. Like when we went diving, we did our dive meetup. What was that, a couple of weeks ago? You brought a cooler of drinks, and that was lovely, just to get back and have a little bubbly water. I like to, this is non car related as well, but I have one of these old school Stanleys, and I'll just like, it's a giant thermos for anyone who's not watching the video. But I usually, before diving, I'll just boil a ton of water so that I can have hot tea after a cold, especially cold water dive. It's nice to just sort of pour it and have it be ready.
You are bougie. You've got
So
this all
bougie.
worked out. Look out.
Yeah. How about you try a day in a life here? You would recognize how not bougie this is. I just very much appreciate the small, like the little, what is it? Like comforts, right? Like I don't have a lot of comfort in my space, but like the few things that I appreciate, I make sure to have,
Yeah, absolutely.
Hot drinks is one of them.
Absolutely. No, I think that's amazing. Yeah, and for me, my context has been more around expeditions. So it's kind of fun to take, a couple trucks, load them up with a bunch of gear, and go out to an exploration site that you have no idea what you're getting into.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because you have the combination of kind of off-roading in some ways, and not full off-roading where like people are trying to climb rocks and things. That's not what I'm talking about. But we've driven through crazy riverbeds and dirt roads for miles and this, that, and the other thing. And so you have to be prepared not only from the diving perspective, and there are ways to do that as well for some of the more bumpy roads and things like that for securing gear we could talk about, but also from a vehicle perspective and what can go wrong there. And so it's a good thing to think about. I think I was
you're
joking with
talking
you about.
yeah, you're talking about a situation where you're stuck in a river, right?
Yeah, no, we literally, the only place to park was in the riverbed. And it was, it wasn't overflowing the tires, probably about halfway up the tire. And if you haven't, but probably most people haven't seen my truck. My truck's,
It's beefy.
it's a big truck, but it's not
Yeah.
the biggest. It's the 1500 size of the GMC, but it's lifted. And the reason it's lifted is for two reasons. One is for that kind of stuff. And two is because, and this is totally bougie, but I have it perfectly lifted so that my set of doubles in a flat parking spot fits perfectly on the tailgate for me to get into my double. So
That's
it's like
smart.
I had to play with it just in the right spot. Of course, for people of your stature, it's way too high, and for people that are taller than me, it's too low. But for me, it's perfect. So,
Well, that's all you need. I mean, you're the one
exactly.
diving out of it the most. So, no, that's cool. And your truck also, because of that experience in the river, you said that you guys got stuck for a little bit, right? And so you ended up getting this newer vehicle so that you would have four-wheel drive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4-wheel drive. Yeah. Well, that was around the boat. We didn't get stuck in the riverbed, but when I used to have a boat, we got
okay.
stuck on the ramp pulling the boat out because we had lots of heavy gear in it, and the ramp was, if you've ever seen kind of more remote ramps, they get covered in moss.
Yes,
over
they're
time.
super slick.
Yeah, and my tires were just spinning, and I mean, it was a little scary, a little hairy to get out. But yeah, the truck for me is the perfect diving platform, an open bed truck for me. I don't like the closed bed in terms of the shells and things, because you can stand, like literally I was talking about being in the riverbed. That was the only place to park. And we could all get in, 3 divers, get into the back of the truck and have plenty of room to gear up, get our dry suits on, get everything together, and keep our street clothes dry, and then get into all our stuff and step down into the riverbed, get our gear in, and walk right into the dive site. It was amazing. But I always get ready in the back of my truck. It keeps the sand out of everything as best you can. It's a great platform for me.
Yeah, no, if I didn't live in mine, like the truck is the way to go. Like when I lived in Playa del Carmen, that's what I had to do the caves and the caverns and stuff. It's just like it's the best way to go. For me, like I like that, but I like the privacy that I have, because you don't really have to think about these things. I feel like I talk about this more often than I maybe need to, but I just never hear anybody talking about this. Like, I have a toilet in my van, right?
Yeah.
So like when you go to those remote places, a lot of time there's no bathroom, right? And like it's not such a big deal if it's actually like really remote, right? And you can just like go into the woods and like do your business or whatever, just pee and whatever. But a lot of places that I was diving in the Pacific Northwest, it was like off of Highway 1, So it's like, where am I supposed to do that? So that's one thing that I do like about a covered, like enclosed area. But I think what you're talking about, like the open bed, it's wonderful for like team diving and just having the space for everybody to hang out and like have their gear and keep it all really clean, because that's a challenge in here.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, I think bathrooms are always a concern. If even for men, if you have to do more than, number one, let's say, toilet paper is a good thing to throw in there. Trash bags are a good thing to throw in there. Soap is a good thing to throw in, like antibacterial
Leave no trace.
soap.
Leave no trace.
Yeah. So I totally get the whole idea of having, the privacy, not only for changing and things like that. And like you mentioned, the restroom and all of that. And I think there's probably a little bit of that, male, female thing going on as well, because like, I'll put on my little surfer ripoff, and that was given to me, by the way. Someday I'll get a real surfer, but I put on that and try to, but I'm okay being in my underwear in the back of my truck. Like that's one of those things, but I'm okay with. Except for there's a thing to look out for if you're hanging out with people and diving with people that like to do a lot of video production.
If you're hanging out with a YouTuber,
if you're hanging out with Sarah, let's just put it that way, and and you go to put on your P valve, before you do that, you need to check the truck for GoPros and cameras hidden all around. So hopefully that footage never sees.
I want to defend myself. Okay. It was not hidden. I put it out in plain sight. I was getting just some footage of us getting ready for the dive or whatever. I think you were in your own little world trying to get yourself set up. And then I realized that I was basically filming you. Don't you worry. That will never see the light of day. But yeah, you got to watch out for that. YouTubers are always recording things.
I guess you gotta be on the scan for cameras, hidden cameras and otherwise, and drones and everything else when you're with that. It's a whole nother step to the P valve situation. Is step 1, check for cameras. Step 2, go about your business. All right, I've got it in my head now.
Oh man, good stuff. So shall we go from top to bottom and talk about how we set up our vehicles and how we go about diving out of the vehicles?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Let's do it. I'll talk about mine. Again, my situation is very unique. I don't think I haven't met a lot of scuba divers that live in vans. I can count on one hand how many of them. And I have seen one setup that was specifically created as a diver mobile, and they lived in it. It's a cool couple from the UK, I believe. I met them in Monterey, and they had a whole one of those super heavy duty pull out trailer type things.
Yep.
And had all their side mount gear, their rebreathers, everything. It was crazy. It was the coolest setup I've ever seen. But that is not my situation. So I bought this. It's a 9640 Conaline. Like I said, nothing fancy. It wasn't expensive. It did have a small build, so the wooden situation. But it was not made for what I use it for. It was made for weekend trips, right?
Right.
So I had to sort of figure out how to secure things and to transport tanks, because obviously my tanks live with me and they travel with me everywhere. So like I was saying, this container behind me is actually just scuba gear. So I have my tanks laying down, sort of they're at an angle, and it's not the best setup. I prefer something that you can actually strap in, especially if you could have them standing. I would prefer to have them standing upright, but I just don't have the space for that. Just because it would be nice to have them locked into the side of the van, but what I do to make them safe and secure is I stack them, and then I use my wetsuit to wedge in the spaces so they don't rattle around. They do not move. They are fully pressed into this space. But that's one thing that you have to watch out for when taking tanks. You don't want them rocking all over the place, because that could be really dangerous. It could also lead to tank valves opening, right? And if you're driving, you're just throwing air or throwing nitrox or expensive gases out into the universe and not using them. But the main thing is that safety bit, right? You don't want, especially if you get into a car crash, you don't want those things flying out at you and causing even more damage to the accident. So having them in this kind of contained area, I'm pretty pleased with. It's not the best situation. It's not comfortable to get them in and out, because I literally have to lift them up and then out. So it's not set up to be nice to my body as I'm getting ready for a dive. But that's the main concern that I have when it comes to transporting tanks, is that they don't move.
Yeah. Yeah, and when it comes to loading and securing gear, I think is that first step. Certainly, tanks are a really important one, and in a truck. So I have a GMC Sierra, and with the flatbed in the back, no cover. And so, I've tried lots of ways to be able to stand tanks up and secure them through bungees and things, and it just never
Yeah.
works in the way I want to. So I lay my tanks down in the grooves of the bed. And one of the things that it's really simple to do, and you don't have to go out and spend money really on it, is I took a pool noodle. I think that's what you call it, a little pool noodle,
Yeah.
an old one, and I cut it in 3 equal pieces. And I drilled a couple holes on the outside of those, and I used a piece of rope and tied it,
Yeah.
about equidistance of a, and it was a, $2, just stick it in those grooves and put bottles between that, because you want to keep them from rolling in the tank, in the bed of the truck, as you take turns and things like that. And then one of the issues I always have is how much gear can you actually load?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you can you can stack tanks. It was a combination of stack and tanks. So stank tanks up on top of each other, as long as they're secure. Again, and I've had 4 sets of doubles and 4 stages and a couple deco bottles and things all in the back of my truck. But you have to kind of play the Tetris to stack it in a way that, again, you're not crushing anything. You're aware of the valve. You're aware of how they'll ride on each other as they hit bumps and scrapes
Yeah,
each
things
other.
like clips. Like if like for mine, when we were traveling, I had my side mount clips on there, so making sure that those aren't getting smashed and like bounced on, right?
Yep. Yeah. So you just have to be a little aware of how that works. And then usually, if I have multiple tanks, I'll take a tie down strap over the whole thing and just kind of cinch it down real quick,
Yeah.
so that there isn't a lot of movement in the back. So that's how I handle tanks most of the time. And it's important to think about an accident. If you
Yeah.
get rear-ended,
Mm-hmm.
which direction is that going to go? So what's more dangerous, the valve or the tank? And so thinking about those things, I'm not going to give safety advice on the podcast, but you need to think through those things. I think through them and have my tank stored in a certain way, so that if something happens, it has the least possible, chance of hurting me and my passengers. And then, when it comes to gear, so we've got a bunch of gear, whether you leave your backplate and wing and on the tanks, or you put it somewhere else, all that stuff. I've just gotten in the habit. I bought the tubs from Costco. They're little, tubs with a red or a yellow top. I think they're $10 or something like
They're
that.
great.
And I just give every diver one. And I say, here you go. Load all your gear in that. Make sure it can close. If you need 2, fine. And then those are stackable. And so if you need to stack them, you can again cinch them down. And then everybody, I just take a piece of blue tape and put everybody's name on them, so we know who's or whose. And I'm able to get 4 divers, actually 5 divers worth of gear in those things, plus tanks in my short bed truck.
That's
If you
awesome.
stack it in the right way.
Yeah.
And what's nice about those is when you take all of the stuff out and get dressed, get your dry suit on, get all your gear ready and all that stuff, all your clothes and things can go right back into the bin because it's not wet yet, and right back into the truck and secured down again. And the other little trick of that I'll say is, you remember I was mentioning that little wire cable, the cable that I made out of from Home Depot for $10 that I can lock. Those Costco bins, and I think all the other bins that are like it, some of them that have the snap-on tops, have little holes through both the lid and the container itself, that you can loop that through overnight, if you want to include that in kind of securing down. Now, granted, someone has a pair of channel locks that can cut it, but it's at least another deterrent from your stuff getting stolen.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Ultimately, if somebody wants to get into those, it's just plastic, right? So they can bust through the box.
They can break the top. Exactly.
Yeah, easy. But still, like for the person that's just going through and wanting to grab something easy, it's not going to be the easy solution, right? It's not going to be the easiest thing to grab. So that's smart. It's really smart. Yeah. So like I said, I have all of my dive gear kind of tucked away, but I make sure like I've kind of gotten my system down with like what things need to be readily available. And because I go snorkeling and freediving, I keep like my mask, my fins, my rash guard, you know, the snorkeling gear in other places that I can grab easily.
Oh, am I, are you good?
I thought, sorry, I
You're
thought
just
you
stopping.
were.
No, I thought we lost you there, like a
No.
volume or mic waste. No,
Should we redo this?
yeah, just start over. It's only a minute in, so just start that
Okay.
portion over. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'll try to segue it better. Okay. Reset.
This is hard. It's hard to do it this way. I know.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I have all of my scuba gear kind of tucked away, like we were talking about, to have things secure, safe, things aren't moving around. But I do like to go freediving and snorkeling. So I have like my mask, snorkel, freediving fins, rash guard, like things that I want more easily available, tucked in other places in the van. And that way I'm able to just like grab and go explore whatever reef I've found.
Yeah, that's a really good point there too. Of like, again, I can kind of grab that stuff or not grab that stuff depending on where I'm going. Since the dive site isn't outside of my house unless it's called the pool. But I do think about packing those tubs in the reverse order of how I get ready.
That's yeah.
And that way it makes it easier to keep things kind of clean, in your station. Because we kind of, there can be 3 stations in the truck of divers getting ready with their own stuff. And if there's 5 divers, then 2 people are just out of the truck. That's the way it goes. Or you take turns. And I like to kind of, so for example, one of the things, fins are the last thing you're going to grab because you're not going to put them on until you're in the water, hopefully, right? Hopefully you're not walking down the sidewalk in your fins. If you're doing that, stop. You're going to hurt yourself. So one of the last things to put on as well, once you have your dry suit on and your kit rigged up and everything done, is your gauge and your compass. And so and your mask, my primary mask. So I stick my mask in the foot of my fins, and I stick my compass and my dive computer in the other fin and pack it that way, because I know that's the last thing I'm going to get out. And I get it all out, and then boom, boom, on the wrists, put my mask over around my neck, and now I'm kitted up and ready to go. So that's the last thing I'm going to do. So thinking through the reverse order of things just helps you stay a little bit streamlined. And like I said, my whole goal in loading, unloading, how I pack, how I store things in the garage, all those sorts of things, is to make it easy to go diving. If it's easy to go diving, I'm going to go do it. If it's hard and where's this and you feel disorganized and stuff's everywhere, all that, then not only does that impact, I think, you mentally, it takes a toll before you get in the water, which is not good, but also just makes it hard to dive. It makes it uncomfortable. And if it's that way, then I'm not going to want to go do it. And so I try to make it as easy as possible. Are you laughing at me about this?
No, I'm laughing because of the state of my van on dive days. So I'm like, Jay would hate diving out of this van. Because like I usually share behind the scenes on like Instagram. I'll post pictures of like the wreckage that is the van during dive days. But it's like a lot. And you're totally right. Like for me, it's a mental load of like before the dive, it doesn't feel too bad. But when I'm dealing with all the wet gear, and we'll get to that part after this, but like it's a lot. So it's good to stay organized when you can, but then sometimes you're dealing with such a small space, it's like there's nothing you can do about it. One thing that I have, and that I think is helpful for anyone who doesn't have a truck, is to have a changing mat. So that's something, we talked about having that space that you can like get ready and whatever, and it's maybe not so easy for me to get ready inside. I just put that changing mat outside and I can stay nice and clean and have all of my stuff kind of laid out there. And that's been a game changer, because I think my first, I don't know, 6 months or something with the dry suit without a changing mat. And I was just like awkwardly, like trying to put everything on without touching the ground and like trying to keep things clean. It was a mess. So that's another really important piece of equipment for like getting ready.
Yeah. And to that point, you certainly can go buy one, and you want to make sure it's a non-slip. It's usually a piece of vinyl, right? Or you can use an old piece of vinyl, as long as it's not slippery, just throw it on the ground. But another little hack that you can use for there is carpet stores are constantly throwing out samples. Just, new carpet comes out, I guess. I don't know the carpet industry, but they're getting rid of samples or giveaway samples. And so you can have a couple samples for free from a carpet store, from Home Depot or something. Or even I've seen some of the fake grass.
Surfers
stuff
love
for
the
people.
fake grass.
You can go to Home Depot or to a carpet store or whatever and probably get all that stuff for free. You don't need to go spend money to get some of those things. And so that's a nice little hack. I like to have those little pieces of carpet actually in the truck as well, because it keeps the sand off and water off of your socks when you're putting them on, if you pull them out at the right time. So it's a nice little hack that, yes, certainly if you have the money, you can go buy one. I think even DUI includes them in their dry suit packages, which is pretty cool. I don't know if it's included or not, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Some companies do. But a piece of vinyl works, an old carpet works, a welcome mat works. Any of that kind of things will work as long as it's slip proof, because you certainly do not want it to be wet and slipping around when you're on there. But it's a really good call out.
Safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about getting like other things that we do to get ready to go. So like something that's really important for me, talking about keeping things clean, is setting up. So like, and I used to do this I used to dive out of a Toyota Corolla. Okay. So I've been dealing with like non-ideal dive vehicles my whole life. Right.
Yeah.
So like setting things up so that once I'm in my suit, or if it's after the dive, I can easily access everything I need. So I make sure that I have like a water bottle right next to the door. I have my hot water, my tea, my coffee mug, like right next to the door. I have a little shower bag, one of those gravity camping showers, right? It's just like a 3-gallon shower bag. I have that full of water so that if I'm in a place that doesn't have a shower where I can rinse my gear, like I can just rinse, I can open up the doors and rinse whatever I need to rinse. So all of that is, I think about that before I get all of my gear on so that it's there and available for me whenever I need it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. Thinking through again, I'm always thinking about, you just got done with an hour or 2-hour dive. You're walked up a bunch of steps in a set of doubles. You're tired, and all you want to do is get the weight off of your back in that moment. And so, how do I have everything ready for me to do that when I'm done with the dive? But I want to back up before that, because there's another little thing I also do. So there's some things like on the way to a dive. So once the truck's packed or the van's packed and you're driving to the dive site, one of the things I find myself doing quite a bit is I have a little converter, AC converter in the truck that I can plug in, normal plugs, into. And I can't tell you how many times that saved my buns when it comes to charging my lights, or charging my my camera batteries for the day. So it's a nice little thing if you get into a pinch, or even just part of if it's an hour to the dive site, plug that thing in, stick a camera on, stick your lights on, stick some batteries on, whatever you might need, your vest batteries, whatever it might be, need charging. It's certainly a little thing that can save you if you forgot the night before to put it on the charger, or you're unsure how much is in it and stuff like that.
Well, and if you're going to do a couple of dives, you have power to charge things between dives, because I know I have like a really powerful video light, and it can get through 2 dives as long as I'm not on like full power the entire time. But it's really nice to just plug it in after the first dive, get a little boost, and go. One thing I'll say, because right now I have like a proper electrical system in the van. So I have a 200 amp hour lithium battery. I have 200 watts of solar on the roof. I have an inverter, like all of that stuff. So I can pretty much function like a normal human being in here. I have to monitor a little bit because, it's not unlimited electricity. But what I did for a long time was I just functioned entirely off of one of those Jackery portable batteries, and that'll do it. Like, you don't have to have your setup where it's like built into the truck. You can just buy one of those. I had like I think it's like a 240 or something. It's not a big one. I think it cost maybe like $200 or $300. not cheap, but like it's not crazy. And you can just have that in your vehicle.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good thing to have in general. Some backup battery, especially if you're doing more remote or expedition diving. Access to power,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to charge things and multiple things, it becomes really important.
Yeah.
And so I like that call out. How about on the way to the dive site? Do you have a favorite playlist, or what are you listening to?
Oh gosh, it always depends on the day, man. Like I've been really into one of my favorite bands is called AJR, and they have just like good, I think you would like them because you're a musician and they use a lot of different instruments. They're layering things in an interesting way. I'm gonna go see them in a couple of weeks as long as I can get the van fixed. They're playing in San Francisco, and so I think that would be on my playlist right now, just because I'm like pumped to go see them.
Yeah, we should do an episode on like pre-dive playlists, because one of my really good friends, and who's been really a mentor to me, Ben Boss, it's like Metallica or nothing. Like
Oh
that's his
God,
pre-dive. For whatever reason,
I don't
he
want to
is
be in
all
that
about
car.
Metallica, and so
No
he like
offense, Metallica's great, but that sounds like a lot.
that's what works for him, right? He for him it's important to have a little Bluetooth speaker while we're all getting ready, and bust out the Metallica, or he has a couple
Okay.
of other playlists that he puts together. I'm so boring sometimes. I tend to like to catch up on my podcasts on the way to a dive site. It's just a focus time. Um, but there are days again where it's, you pop on the Bob Marley, or you're playing some of the
Something
old,
chill.
I like Dave Matthews, say what you will, but I like Dave Matthews, the instrumentation of those things. Or, sometimes like we were listening to, the Black Pumas, and letting some of that play. So I don't necessarily need the music to get me pumped up to go diving. I'm already pumped up,
Yeah.
but I like to kind of use the music in the opposite way to kind of chill me out. And
Yeah.
some people think I'm nuts because I'll put it on like, you know, jazz, not slow jazz, like real jazz.
Jazz
And
is great. What's wrong with that?
oh, people give me a sideways look. I'm like, oh, I play this list. Students are looking at me like, who is this guy? Like, what a weirdo. But honestly, my Spotify has no idea what to do with me, because my kids obviously don't have their own email accounts. And so they use, whenever they play something, it's off of my account for whatever
So you're
reason.
like getting baby shark do 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 do
Oh
do
my
baby.
gosh.
Sorry, now
Yeah.
everybody's gonna have that stuck in their head.
Yeah. By the way, that was Sarah, not me. So if you have hate email, Sarah at the dive table, not Jay at the dive table, because I didn't bring up Baby Shark. Uh,
I know, it
but
gets
yeah,
stuck.
no, it's like I get. I mean, right now it's like, hey, you really love Taylor Swift, and I'm like,
Do I?
I'm down for Taylor, but like not really. That's like because my kids, that's all they play, or like So
That's
I
cute.
don't think Spotify knows what to do with me, but yeah. So if I can't just hit play my favorite mixes, which would be cool, because who knows what's going to come up at that point.
Yeah. That's
So
funny.
that's a good one. Music. We should do a whole episode on music. That would be fun.
I've thought about
All right.
doing like a public, because I have my Spotify for a Soul Unlimited as like public, and I have a couple of playlists there. I've thought about doing one where I just collect everybody's like favorite song on my travels and like put it together as like the ultimate diver playlist. But
Heck yeah,
anyway,
let's do
I
it.
should do that.
That would be fun. That would be really fun.
Okay, so we've kind of talked already about like getting ready. Do we feel like that is covered? Can we talk about like storing things for while we're gone and kind of move through those things? Does that sound good? Okay.
Yes, let's talk about that.
So I don't have a lot to share on this because I have an old school van with an old school key, and literally the key just goes with me diving.
Yeah.
Like it's not a challenge at all to deal with. But those of you who have real, nice cars, newer cars, you can talk about what you do with your key.
Yeah, so it's a good one to think about, and there's a lot of different schools of thought. Some people take a Ziploc bag and stick their keys in that, and then stick it in their dry suit. Others just stick it in their dry suit and don't worry about it. And I guess I'm a little bit very hesitant. I've had seals break. I've had the suit flooded before. Like that experience of like, not only are you soaking wet, uncomfortable, and then your key doesn't work, just sounds terrible. It's never happened to me, but that's just how it's starting to play off in my mind. So I'm not a big fan of bringing your keys with you on the dive. That's me. It doesn't mean that that's the wrong thing to do. It's just me. So I've done a lot of experimenting around this, everything from like leaving it in the gas, leaving my keys in, which is not smart, from what I've been told and understand. So what I've settled on is I have a little magnetic lockbox, and I won't tell you where I put it on the truck, but I put my keys. It fits my keys perfectly. It's a little lockbox that has a combo on it, and I can stick my keys anywhere on the truck because it's magnetic, so it sticks there. The lesson I've learned is to store it back towards the tailgate, and I won't tell you where, but back towards there, because when you come up from the dive with a set of doubles on and all that, you don't want to be crawling under the truck trying to find the key and all that, which you could do without the doubles. So I want to be able to come up to the truck, press the button, and the tailgate comes down so I can get the doubles off. Then I can go chase down the keys and deal with the rest of it.
Wait, can you not pull the sorry, what are the words? Can you not pull that the tailgate down without the key?
It's a button.
Stop it.
It's a button with the key. Yeah, you cannot do it without the key. I'm so
behind the times. I don't understand. When I get in new cars, I have no idea how to drive them. Like, I really, truly don't. I don't have any experience with them. That's wild. Okay.
Yeah, there's no handle anymore in the tailgate.
That's crazy.
It's a button.
Okay.
And in my case, I have two buttons because one button does the full tailgate and the other one does I don't remember what they call it. It's a second tailgate that folds down into a stair if you want it, which is cool.
That was pretty cool. I liked that.
It is cool. It's a nice little feature. But yeah, so I always kind of keep my key near the tailgate so I can come back up, press the button, it comes down, and then I can deal with everything else. And then in terms of like my watch, my wallet, my phone, other valuables and things that I have, I leave them in the truck because the truck automatically locks.
Yeah.
So I put them in the truck. I put them in a certain place that I know where they are. But it's not obvious. It's not just left on the seat so that someone's tempted to break in, because you are gone for an hour and a half, 2 hours, where your car is, not just there.
It's vulnerable.
And it's vulnerable. So you have to think through those things. Unfortunately, not all people, not most people are, wanting to get into your stuff, but you have to think about the few that do, and protect yourself in that way.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Okay. I think that's mostly the stuff. We've talked about rinsing, after the dive, rinsing gear. How do you set up? Because I've seen some people set up their trucks with like those really cool PVC, like pressurized showers. That's freaking badass. Like those are neat. What do you do? Do you have anything?
No, there's quite elaborate setups that I've seen in both trucks and, by the way, in SUVs. And I think the most popular car that I hear in terms of shore diving is the Subaru, because they call it the Scuba-roo.
Adorable.
It's the perfect size, I guess, for getting on your stuff kneeling down and enough space. And I've seen elaborate things built out of PVC that create shelves and storage. It's really awesome what some folks will do. Yeah. That's not me. For me, when it comes to rinsing, either, hopefully you're at a dive site where there's freshwater showers. It's not always the case, but if there are, I'll go over there and rinse off real quick. If not, I've seen these really cool like rinse kits that they're selling now, where it's like basically a pump and a shower head, and it's meant for, the beach and all that stuff. They're kind of pricey in my mind, like for what they are. I don't really need it, and I don't have a camp shower. So I just leave my gear the way it is with the salt water on it until I get back to the house. And then what I do for cleaning is I pull the truck up. I have a little hill. It's kind of coming into my property, the opposite direction of how you normally would do it, to get onto this little hill. But on that hill, right next to it is the hose. And so I get in the back of the truck and I spray everything down. Then I start taking gear apart and spraying the gear in that way down and cleaning the crevices and stuff like that, and the dry suit and all that. And then once everything's out and kind of on the drying racks where I want it, I go back to the bed of the truck and I put a little bit of detergent and I spray down the back of the truck, because that salt will, eventually create problems for your vehicle.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Eventually it will.
Talk
dry
about
rot out
rust.
pieces.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I have a serious rust problem, let me tell you. So that is good that you're doing that because your truck is nice. You don't want that to get messed up because it's hard to treat.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of in a nice setup in the sense that I can just pull up on that little hill, and or if you have a driveway or something like that, and just spray it all out, and you're kind of done. It makes it easy. Again, that's my goal, is making things very, very easy to go diving and clean up and all that. But yeah, I mean, I don't use a lot of conditioners on my gear. Every once in a while, or if I'm going to the dive shop, like we had that experience. We stopped by the dive shop to get fills
Yeah,
after dive, and they happen to have a rinse tub, and I'm like, heck yeah, I'm taking advantage of
done.
that right now.
Yeah, I do
Throw
that
everything in there
all
and
the
done.
time. Like, that's one of my favorite things. It's one of my hacks as a van lifer that I'm a scuba diver. So, like, water is usually a situation, right? Like, you have to go, you have limited amount of water in the van, so you have to always go fill up. And like my sink water, I never have to pay for that because I go to dive shops and they're totally cool with me just filling up. It's only 6 gallons. It's not like I'm, filling up my 25-gallon tank or whatever.
Right, right.
So I do that all the time. That's my favorite way to rinse gear because the camper shower, it's fine in a pinch, but it's not getting it nearly as clean as it needs to be. The other
Yeah.
thing for those of you who have like limited space, especially if you're living in an apartment or whatever, I have one of those like collapsible buckets, and it's like a decent sized bucket. Like I can fit my dry suit in it if I needed to give it a dunk. I can fit, my side mount gear, whatever. You can fill that up with water and use it as like a transportable, if somebody doesn't have like a bathtub or whatever. That's a great solution. And that I have literally just tucked under my sink here. And I use
Yeah.
that when I don't like rinse everything, I'll use it as a catch. So like I have to dry my gear in the van sometimes. So I have one of those accessory hangers, the ones with like the long prongs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only scuba hanger I have because again, I have to be very like minimalist about the stuff that I have in the van. But what I found is with that hanger, I can put my side mount harness on it, place the dry suit feet like over it and hang my
Mm-hmm.
dry suit. Obviously my dry suit is way too long to just like hang from my van because sometimes I do have to dry my gear inside. That's just a
Mm-hmm.
necessity for me. So I take that collapsible bin and I put it directly under the gear so that
Smart.
so that it can drip and not make a total mess out of my van. And also, I don't have the best setup. Like, don't judge me. Like, all of my electrical stuff is right where all my stuff dries. It is not a good setup. But with the collapsible bin, it keeps everything in its place. So it works
Yeah.
out actually really well. And then when like that'll happen, like I'll leave it overnight, it might still be a little bit damp, and then I can get everything outside again earlier in the morning so that it's not getting like direct sunlight because I try to protect my gear from direct sunlight as well, which is hard when you like live outside basically.
Right.
But that's how I set it up. It works for me. It's a super compact kind of drying situation instead of having like, a big setup in your rig or in your house because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people would struggle to do that. I've heard of people putting like load bearing bars in their bathroom, like
The
over their
shower.
tub.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super smart.
Yeah. Yeah. A buddy of mine rented a new apartment, and he had 2 bathrooms. I mean, maybe it was purposefully or not, but one bathroom was just his scuba locker, and he did the
Nice.
same thing. He put a little bar across, and he could hang everything up and just would stick everything in there, which was smart.
That's super
I
smart.
thought. Yeah, I think with my gear, the drying of the both the undergarments and the dry suit are the critical ones, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you got to turn your dry suit inside out. And I have hard boots on mine, so it's a thing, but you can do it. You push the heel in, pull it through. If you need the inside dry overnight, you can do that. But yeah, the hangers make a big difference. The other thing you can use too is on travel. I think it's like $10 on Amazon. You can get these nylon clippable gator hangers. And they're essentially these 2 loops of nylon that have clips, and another piece of nylon that then has a hanger, and it weighs nothing. It's not a hanger itself that's coming bulky in your gear, but it works really well for being able to hang your gear up in, a hotel and in a pinch and things like that, or outside. But typically, I think, yeah, the turning it inside out is when I need it dry by the morning, and that seems to be a good idea. But the other thing I've seen that I thought was really smart was actually at the overhead environment in Florida. Amazing place. Shout out to Dean and his crew there. Had a great time staying with them. But he had these little X fans that you could tip up. They're just little. They're meant for drying floors, but they're tippable without affecting anything. And he had them right in his dry suit drying station. And you could take them, flip on the fan, flip it up, because in Florida, it's also very muggy.
Yeah.
And so you could flip it up and into the inside from the floor going up into your suit. Overnight, it would dry your suit like amazingly.
Totally.
So I haven't bought one of those fans yet, but it was a nice little thing that he had, and I looked at them. You can get them on I think they're red, the red fans. I don't remember the exact name of them, but it was a really cool little hack. I thought.
Yeah, I think having any kind of fan would be helpful in that if you're doing a lot of consecutive diving. Like I have a permanent. And this is actually like you can't see it, but it's a marine grade. Like a lot of sailboats have this kind of fan where like you can tilt it and spin it. Like it can literally hit any part of my van, and it's hooked into the electrical system. And I will do that as well, where I'll just like turn it on and point it directly at my gear. And that helps with the whole situation. As far as undergarments, I just hang that stuff wherever I can, even if it's like over the freaking steering wheel when I sleep at night.
Exactly.
Yeah, because that's really key. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else makes the day happen. I think that's most of it.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll mention is if you are doing kind of multiple days of diving with lots of divers, how you repack the van, or sorry, not the van, the truck in my case, but the van in other people's cases, with thinking through, we need to go get fills.
Yeah.
And so again, that's a really important repacking situation. It's a little bit of the Tetris, but some fill stations, which I really like, are able to bring a whip out to the truck, which is awesome. That's like the best case scenario,
sick.
because
wow,
you just pull up and boom, and it's done. But if you need to take tanks in, yet you're diving in the morning, one of the little hacks is leave everything assembled and then just take the back plate and wing, lift the whole thing off of the set and keep it like a taco and put it back in the truck, take the tanks in, get them filled. Then when you put the doubles back in the truck, you just put the whole taco back on top and find the holes and secure back down. And that way you don't have to break down all of your gear and reassemble all of your gear every time. It saves you a lot of time in terms of how you, again, pack for the fills or pack for, whatever the next day of diving might look like. So just another consideration. It's taking years to figure it out.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point, because I don't have a lot of experience with that, because whenever I'm diving with other people, they bring their own vehicle, right? So like we're all kind of transporting our own tanks, and that's smart. And like it's better if we can carpool places and like all dive together, because it's not only going to be better, you're not having a bunch of extra fumes in the environment that we don't need. But also it's going to save your life if you're going somewhere that's actually more popular, and parking is a situation, right? Like
exactly.
If you guys all work together and carpool, then it's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's great about that too, the other things that I throw in the truck for those scenarios, I'll throw I have in a Pelican case, my analyzer and my pressure gauge checker with a roll of tape and a Sharpie in there.
Safety stuff too. Your O2 kit.
I throw my O2 kit in there. I have a
first aid,
a hard case for my Save a Dive kit, but it's got extra hoses and tools, all of that. And then of course the first aid kit is part of my O2 kit as well. And then I always throw some Cliff Bars and some snack stuff that's just kind of hidden around the truck that if we need it, it'll last the Armageddon. So, someone really needs something, I can reach in the glove box, or I can reach into the center console and, here's a peanut butter Cliff Bar for you, and no worries, it works out well.
It may not be that perfect nutritional meal like we talked about in a previous video, but it'll get the job done so that you don't go
get the job done.
Woozy.
But you want to think about that stuff in your packing, especially if you're the one that's driving. I like to really try to make sure my vehicle is a platform for diving, and so therefore I need to take responsibility over having those things in the truck, in the vehicle, accessible. And then I also, one other thing too is I also, even if it's new people or old people I'm diving with, I always just give a little briefing, 30 seconds. Like, hey guys, the O2 is right here behind the driver's seat in the back, and the fire extinguisher's here, and the first aid kit's here, and there's water here. So in case anyone needs something,
going to be here.
And the key is going to be here. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that way everyone knows. I've thank God, never had to use it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But if something happens to me, I'm not going to be there to be able to tell people where things are.
Right.
So now at least it's been said. And then I also say, 911 or whatever the local department is. And usually if I'm diving with someone, like we were up in Laguna, he knew where the local chamber was, so that we just have that information in our heads right before the dive, which is good.
Yeah, it's good to have, even if it's not written out or whatever, kind of go through your emergency action plan, right? What are the steps that need to happen? So that's a good point. That's great. Yeah. Very exciting. I'm finally, so I have not been a good example in shore diving and doing the things that I've been doing because I've been so broke. But I'm not as broke anymore, and I am officially going to have emergency oxygen in my van, which is a really big deal because I've been very, very careful. If anybody has watched my videos, the dive dry road trip, I was so conservative and nervous about doing a lot of those dives, and I kept them really shallow and checked all the conditions, made sure that it was going to be good because I didn't have that stuff, and that's not a good idea. Anyone that is doing shore diving, definitely have emergency oxygen, first aid. Those are key pieces. And I'm not proud of the fact that I wasn't doing those things, but I share it because I'm sure other people don't. I know a lot of people that don't go shore diving with oxygen, tons. I mean, I've even seen when I was in Playa del Carmen, people going out to the caverns and stuff, and they wouldn't have O2. Of course, somebody in the parking lot probably does, right? Because there's a lot of people, but it's my goodness, we all need to have that stuff in case. We never want to think about being in an accident, but it happens. So it's an exciting time. I'm stepping into more safe practices, and I'm very pleased.
Good. Exactly. I mean, because O2 is a treatment for whatever DCS it is, whether it's lung over expansion or bubbles or any of those things. And so, the ways that, again, if you're not CPR O2 provider trained yet, I'd encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
But if you're
they're
not,
easy.
They're really easy, and they're really informative. I can do that as well, or work through Dan. Dan has an incredible course. Really enjoyed the thoroughness of their course. Is why I became a Dan instructor, because of how amazing I thought their course was. But the other thing that that some people do is a deco bottle. So if you've got a 40 of O2, if you're tech trained, and you happen to have that, throw it in the truck. If you don't happen to have an O2 provider kit, even breathing off of that reg without the mask and all that stuff is going to be better than nothing.
As long as
so
the
that's
person
another way
can
to throw it in.
breathe from it. Yeah. No, totally.
Exactly. As long as they can breathe from it. Right. Sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah.
So having that backup safety gear is I feel important if you're going to turn your vehicle
100%.
into a platform for diving.
100%.
Yeah, just think of yourself as a mobile dive center, right? Or a mobile dive boat. But you don't need the emergency, in case we sink, this raft will automatically deploy. You don't need that. You don't need the locator beacon in the middle of the ocean. That's all good, but everything else you kind of do.
Yeah, you might need a flag, though. That is one thing that we didn't talk about because we haven't been using them. I don't think they're regulated. You don't need them in California, or at least in the parts where we've been. But like in the Puget Sound, there are certain areas where you need to have a dive flag. So having some sort of float with a flag is also good to have in your vehicle gear.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of it. I think that was pretty thorough. Different
Yeah.
viewpoints and experience, the setups that we have. Because I think a lot of what you said and what I said can be transformed into people diving from Subarus and like my Toyota Corolla. That was my scuba mobile first.
Yep.
So I think that's cool. And I hope more people are going to get out and do this kind of stuff because it's cheaper and it's a lot of fun. It becomes an adventure.
It does. And shore diving, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I love all forms of diving. But the only thing I haven't done, and we talked about this before, I have not done a liverboard yet, surprisingly, which I will have to plan for. They are. They're pricey.
Yeah.
Hey, liverboards that want us to come on the podcast from your, give us a shout out. But no, I haven't done that. But all sorts of diving. I love boats. I love shore. I love, going off of a dock or whatever it might be. But I will say it's nice when you can load everything up and really think it through and use your vehicle as that platform. It just makes the diving, whether you're on an expedition dive or you're somewhere remote, or you're just going to, La Jolla Shores where there's a nice parking lot and showers and bathrooms and everything else. I kind of approach it all the same, unless there's a specific thing I need. It's just, this is my platform. I get ready the same. I get in the routines the same. And it makes it easy to go and dive, which is the whole point of going to do it.
Yeah, and it becomes like the day adventure and activity, and you can have your home base, which is always nice. So cool. I would love to hear what other people are using to do these adventures. What kinds of things like tools they use. Maybe we can link some of the items that we mentioned in the podcast description. We can talk to Daniel about that and see if we can work some magic.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Gotta earn your paycheck, buddy.
Yeah. But we'll see if we can do that. But I would love to hear from people on what they're using and what they think is like non-negotiable, like they have to have it, so you can reach out to us on the Facebook group. We're being more active there, so Dive Table Facebook group. You can also email us, Sarah with an H at thedivetable.com or Jay at thedivetable.com.
Yeah, and if you have one of those cool like PVC setups you've built in the back of your SUV,
send us a photo.
Scuba, send us a photo. I want to see it. I mean, I've seen some cool, elaborate setups with trays that pull out and all this kind of stuff. I think all that stuff's really cool, and other people can benefit from your engineering of it in their own vehicle or in their own situation. So post the videos up on Facebook. Have a good discussion about how you put yours together and why you have it the way it is. And I just love walking around the parking lot of a dive site and seeing how everybody kind of does their thing. And that's where you steal a little bit of this and steal a little bit of that for your own. And that's how you kind of figure it out as you go. So send us some photos on the Facebook group, and looking forward to that conversation.
Cool. Thanks. Talk to you later.
Yeah. See you on the next episode of the Dive Table.
The Dive Table is a production of Fish Dive Surf Incorporated and a member of the Fish Dive Surf Podcast Network. You can find out more at www.fishdivesurf.com.